Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about something you've probably never heard of, but I'm sure you've all experienced. As a double major in art and psychology, I've always been really interested in the psychological effects of the physical environment, how working in a gray cubicle day after day would make someone feel, how living in dorm rooms makes someone feel, how moving from one part of the country to another would change the way you feel. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a theory called restorative environments. The title of my project is Identifying and Documenting Restorative Spaces in the Santa Cruz area. And what I did was photograph places residents go when feeling stressed, overworked, or overwhelmed. The first person who noticed the restorative effects of physical environments was a researcher named Roger Ulrich in 1983. And he noticed that people who were in hospital rooms with window views of nature as compared to buildings had significantly faster recovery times. So he proposed that viewing nature has a psychophysiological stress reduction effect. And then there was a competing theory for a long time, which is attention restoration theory, until in 1995, Kaplan, the researcher who proposed attention restoration theory, proposed an integrative framework in which stress is reduced as a result of being in restorative environments, but as an effect of directed attention fatigue, which I'll talk about more in a minute. So attention restoration theory says that if you spend time in a certain place, it'll mentally soothe you if you're feeling overworked, overwhelmed, or stressed. And how it does this is by restoring directed attention fatigue. Now, directed attention fatigue sounds very complicated, but in actuality, it's really simple. It's that feeling of being unable to focus, being unable to ignore distractions. An example from my life this week, I was framing these photographs that you see in a dark room for like 6 hours with no windows. And at the end of it, I couldn't even think. I took a bath and I locked the door behind me and had to break into my own bathroom just because I was so fatigued. I couldn't focus on anything. So any prolonged mental effort will result in directed attention fatigue. And theoretically, if you visit a restorative environment, that stress will just disappear and you'll be able to refocus yourself and relax, essentially. So attention restoration theory postulates that this is a pretty recent phenomenon because up until the modern age, people didn't spend 20 hours a day staring at a computer screen. We had more freedom to go out and pursue our interests, and we didn't spend so much time sitting in a dark room. And so this quote talks about how it's an evolutionary imperative that we can't force ourselves to just focus on something for an extended period of time. Because if we were to do that, if like an evolving human were to do that, they'd get eaten by a bear. You need to be distracted, essentially, to keep yourself safe. And this directed attention fatigue is supported in studies of children with attention deficit disorder. Obviously, with children with attention deficit disorder suffer from an increased rate of directed attention fatigue. They're more easily distracted and less able to focus because they have less capacity for directed attention. And findings of this particular study, the Taylor, Quo, and Sullivan, found that attention deficit symptoms are more manageable after children spend time in green play settings. So all of this supports the idea that certain environments can restore directed attention fatigue and are therefore restorative. But most previous research has just focused on proving that natural environments are more restorative than built environments. They use pictures from nature magazines compared to pictures of buildings to prove that nature is more restorative. They take people on walks through rural and urban settings. They measure greenery near the home, and they compare window views. And all of this has proven that natural environments are more restorative than built environments. But that's not enough. We spend 90% of our time indoors, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. So we can't just say that natural environments are more restorative than built environments. We have to figure out what exactly about natural environments is more restorative and how we can incorporate that into built environments, because we can't just go live in nature. We have to work with what we have. So with that in mind, the goals of this study is to figure out what physical characteristics make an environment restorative, how these particular physical features promote a restorative experience, how these features can be utilized in a built environment, and what physical features restorative built environments utilize. So to do this, I created a study. I created a survey. It had 10 questions, and it was available online to anyone who cared to take it. In order to get Santa Cruz residents, I had the school email it out, and I sent it to anyone I knew who lived in Santa Cruz. So the first 4 questions on the survey asked for some general demographic information, and in total, I got about 140 responses. I had to eliminate 30 of them because they were left incomplete. Like, people answered the first 3 questions and didn't go to the second page. So of the remaining about 110, I had 16 males and 83 females, mostly between the ages of 18 and 20, but about half were between 21 and 29, and only 3 were over 30. Most of my respondents were white. You can see the pie chart here. In general, the ethnic breakdown of my respondents mirrors the population of Santa Cruz County, so that gives it a little bit of validity. And then I asked how often participants experience stress in a normal week on a 5-point Likert scale, from extremely often to not very often. As you can see, most people felt stressed, overworked, or overwhelmed at least moderately often every week, with less than 10 people saying they feel stressed not at all often, and more people saying they feel stressed very or extremely often. So obviously my sample had pretty good reason. If these people are stressed, then they do need to visit restorative environments, and hopefully do so. So I asked participants where they go to relax or just be when they feel stressed, overwhelmed, or overworked. And I asked for a place away from their home in Santa Cruz County, and I asked why this environment, more than anywhere else, helps them relax and find feelings of peace. And then I asked how much better they felt after leaving this place. Did it make them feel much better, or did they feel not at all better? And then the places that people said made them feel much better, or that several people said made them feel somewhat better, I went and photographed to document and try to begin to identify correlations from not only the photographs, but people's responses. So to answer my research questions, first of all, what physical characteristics make an environment restorative? What I found is that the most important feature of a restorative environment is that it's open and vast. As you can see in all these pictures, the space is big and wide open. There's nothing crowding you. People said that being away from the confinement of buildings is liberating. And then another important feature that I found was silence. Being away from the noise of traffic and other people going about their lives. seems to be especially restorative. And then to answer why or how these particular physical features promote a restorative experience, first of all, the vastness and the openness seems to help participants reflect on their problems and realize that the things that they are struggling with and stressing out about aren't as overwhelming and insurmountable as they seem. It gives them a chance to really reflect on the impermanence of their problems. And then the silence and serenity helps participants, in their own words, get into a think-free zone. And the effects of chronic noise has been well documented. I put in a quote here from a study by Evans, Higg, and Bullinger, which says that which found a link between chronic exposure to noise and elevated neuroendocrine markers of stress. So basically, when there's chronic noise happening all around you, it's very stressful. Even when these participants were sleeping, they had higher levels of stress than people who weren't exposed to chronic noise all the time. So silence is obviously very important in terms of helping relieve that stress. So then, in terms of how these physical features can be utilized in a built environment, making a built environment open and vast is a little bit difficult because, due to the nature of a built environment, rooms can only be so big. But with the use of windows and high ceilings, it is possible to make rooms feel open and vast. Silence is a bit easier. Making thicker walls can make a room much more silent, especially in low-income housing as a solution to cut costs. They tend to make walls really thin so you can hear everything, and that's just another factor going against those people. So then there were a few responses that did identify built environments as the most restorative. One in particular is a cafe called Lulu Carpenter's, which one participant says is so restorative because it has large and open windows, and then it uses wood decoration, both of which are taking advantage of natural features that are restorative. And also, it's just a really good example of how these features can easily be utilized in a built environment. So I did have a relatively large sample for my project, but the bigger the survey is, the more valid it is. So in the future, if someone were to redo this, having more participants could only make it more valid. I'd hoped to get the most restorative environments that people visited, but it's entirely possible that people don't realize that they need restorative environments, so they don't seek them out, and the places they named are just the places they'd been recently or places that are near their home. This is certainly reflected in the number of places that are on campus in my research. And then this is also isolated to the Santa Cruz area, where a lot of spaces are open and vast, and it would be interesting to see if these same sort of responses would be found in other metropolitan areas. So with that said, I think that would be the first thing I would propose for future research, is to do the same study in other places and see if similar locations are described. And then there have been studies in the past where they were mostly based on trying to prove that natural environments are more restorative than built environments. But it is possible to test if images are restorative, and I think it would be interesting to see if these images do offer some level of restoration to viewers. I didn't test for that in this study, but I think that's an important next step. So I'd like to thank you all for being here today.